and welcome to another episode of Elaine A. Powers' Reptile Side Chat. I'm Elaine Powers, of course, and that's Elaine A. Powers if you have to look me up. And today I'm going to be talking to you about scutes. Now, we're not talking about the scutes as in boot scootin', you know, how you dance and line dancing and country western, but about scutes. S-C-U-T-E, and the bunch of them together are scutes. It's one of my favorite words. I just love saying scutes. So scutes are what allows turtles and tortoises to get bigger. Now, as you may recall, tortoises and turtles have this hard shell that protects their body. And in order to grow, they have to be able to move the pieces of their shell to get larger. Now, the shells are actually made of fused bones. And on top of these bones are layers of keratin. Now, keratin is the same protein you have in your fingernails and in your hair. And it's that covering that's on top of the tortoises and turtles. And it does have blood and nerve endings. So if you're wondering if that tortoise can feel you rubbing on its back or if it's enjoyed having its back scratched, the answer is yes. They do have nerve endings and they do have a blood supply to their shell. Now, what's interesting is that the number of scutes on the top of a turtle or tortoise is the same. They all have 38 scutes on their carapace. And as you know, the carapace is the top part of the shell, the plastron is underneath. Now, the number of scutes on the plastron can differ from 12 to 16. Usually it's 12 to 14 in a tortoise, but the top, always the same number. And you notice that they come in an interesting pattern. You have the ones coming down the center, and then you have the rows on the outside, and then you have this little fringe of scutes all the way around. And that little fringe can allow the different species of tortoises to add a little flare to the shell if they want, or if they want it hugging their body, it'll be down smooth. So it gives them a chance to show a little individual creativity. So now you may be saying, but Elaine, what about those sea turtles? And what about leatherback turtles, you know, like they have in Florida? They obviously don't have scutes. No, their scutes have been replaced with leathery skin. But for today's talk, and since all of my tortoises are land dwellers, we're going to talk about the scutes that are found in tortoises and most turtles. Now, I did invite Trevor Box Turtle out today, but he said just tell them I have the same number of scutes on my carapace. Yeah. Let the tortoises have their moment in the spotlight. So, you know, as I've mentioned before, when turtles grow, they actually shed off the layer of keratin. But tortoises put the layer of keratin in between. And I don't know if you can see on my little example here, but they're actually little growth rings. And those growth rings are kind of similar to what you see in a tree. If they have a really good year, then they put in a lot of keratin. If they had a rough year, you know, not much to eat, the layer in between the scutes is a lot thinner. Unfortunately, as tortoises age, they can actually rub off the top layer. So using these rings as a gauge for telling the age of a tortoise is not always accurate. But it does let you see just how the tortoise was growing. So now I'm using my little plastic friend here because, you know, it's not good to hold tortoises upright and makes their internal organs settle down and can cause damage. So for the beginning of today's talk, my little friend here offered to volunteer. Now, the problem in captivity is that we don't really mimic the outside world that a tortoise lives in. Now, normally this carapace is very, very smooth. It doesn't have any bumps or ridges. And I did invite Zoe Sonoran Desert Tortoise to come in and show her her smooth to show you her smooth shell. She has a perfect shell. But it's 112 degrees outside, and she's deep in her den, and she declined to come out. So perhaps at some future reptile side chat, I can share her lovely shell with you. But yeah, it's really hot out there, folks. So let's look at a real tortoise's shell. All right, so here we have my friend Rose. Or actually, I'm sorry, this is Gladio. She lost the toss of the shell. Oh, tortoise shell, get it. Okay, so she's a little heavy. You know, as I've mentioned, tortoise shells are actually quite strongly created. So you can see how she's got some carapace. Now, different tortoise species have different colors in their scutes. You know, it forms a nice little pattern. Sometimes the pattern is symmetrical. Sometimes, you know, it's a little more varied. But you can see how there's little ridges in between the scutes, and how, you know, they seem to look like a growth ring. Little technical difficulty there. And so when she gets bigger, and she's getting bigger and heavier, she just puts in more material between them. And you can see her nice line of scutes along the edge. Hi, say hello. Now, you'll notice that she isn't perfectly smooth. And a redfoot tortoise out in the wild, the shell would be nicely domed as it is, but it would also be very smoothed. And this is called pyramiding. And it's very common in tortoises that live in captivity. All right. And pyramiding is when, instead of the scute just getting longer and growing outwards, they grow upwards. And the keratin piles up on top. So it looks like the scute is actually forming a pyramid. And this is an indication that something is not right, either in the husbandry or the health of the tortoise. And for many, many years, scientists and captive breeders have been trying to figure out how to combat this pyramiding issue. Now, most of the time, the pyramiding does not affect the tortoise's life. They live a long, healthy life with a pyramided shell. It can interfere when the male tries to go mount the female. If the shell is too high, then he can't get in position to mount her. So it does have an effect that way. So when I received Amarillo here, Amarillo is another redfoot tortoise, and I got her from the vet. She had been surrendered because the people couldn't care for her properly. And so he asked me if I wanted another tortoise, and of course the answer to that question is always yes. You can never have too many tortoises. You know, they're like potato chips. You can't have just one. But you'll notice that, you can try it from different angles. You see how her scutes are really quite pyramided. And they actually used to be a lot worse because she has been eating, and so the scutes have started putting in the material between and separating them so it doesn't look as pyramided as when she came. When she came, she was just a solid bunch of bumps just clustered up here on top, and she was half this size. So she's coming along really well. So with better nutrition and better husbandry, the effects can be decreased, but unfortunately the pyramiding will never go away. So the best we can do as people who are caring for tortoises in captivity is to try to give them the best living conditions as possible and make our tortoises happy and healthy. All right, so what causes this pyramiding? Well, one thing that's very common in reptiles in captivity, tortoises, turtles, iguanas, especially iguanas, different of the lizards kept, is metabolic bone disease. And that's when the reptile doesn't get enough calcium and vitamin D. So, a lot of people just have them under a regular light bulb. Even though the tortoise may have enough calcium, it's not able to put it into its bones. So, and in iguanas, that can make their bones really soft and mushy. It's really quite sad. So that's called metabolic bone disease, very common in reptiles in captivity. Another reason, and it was actually probably a very common cause of pyramiding, is too much protein in the tortoise's diet. Now, this can come a couple ways. You can be eating meat that is catching outdoors, or it's finding outdoors. If you have a dog, it may be eating the dog's poop and getting too much protein that way. My sulcata went after a dead bird once. Not sure that was a good source of protein. Or people feed them lots and lots of hay. Now, hay doesn't have much protein in it, but if they eat lots and lots and lots of it, it can eventually build up. So what you need when you have a tortoise is lots of variety. In nature, they spend all day nibbling here, nibbling there, and I confess, even in my house, their diet choices are not what they would find out in the wild. So I try to give them a lot of variety. I like variety in my diet, but I'm sure they could do better out in the wild. Another problem with having a tortoise outside is they can pick up the parasites that might be around, and that can also lead to the stress and causing the pyramiding. Now, one thing along with being able to graze is the tortoises really need to walk. They walk miles every day trying to find the food that they want out in the wild. And when you keep them in a small area or even a small box in your house, they're not getting the exercise they need. So make sure your tortoises are getting their exercises. Mine do laps around the house. They're pretty much walking around all day long, even though they're fed in just one or two places. All right, another problem that they came across and discovered is humidity. Now, humidity can be very important to a tortoise, even though it may be a desert tortoise like mine. That's why they dig those dens, is not only to get away from the heat, but to have a den where the humidity is a bit higher, away from the really dry desert that's out there now. And this helps keep their shells the right shape. I have noticed in my raising of hatchlings that keeping the humidity at the right level can be important. And my first hatchling actually has a little pyramiding, not too terrible, but the younger ones are doing a much better job, and I think that's because I'm doing a better job with the humidity. All right, lack of fiber. These guys are grass eaters. They're out there chewing on that fiber-filled grass, and sometimes in our diet that we create for them, the fiber may not be enough. And then temperature. Temperature is very, very important. We like our comfortable temperatures. Unfortunately, that may not be the same as what the tortoise prefers. So basically, the main cause of husbandry is we do a really bad job of mimicking nature. So it's an area for us to improve on, and so that none of our tortoises that we raise have pyramids like poor Amarillo here, but have nice smooth shells like Zoe or Gladio do. So, one more review of what we've looked at and discussed today. We have the back of the tortoise, top of the tortoise, the carapace, the plastrons underneath. You notice she does have scutes underneath. In a tortoise, the scutes are not shed, but they actually just get bigger, and they put material in the little grooves between them, and then the tortoise just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And poor care makes them rise up like this instead of making a nice smooth shell. They have 38 on the carapace. All tortoises have the 38 scutes on their carapace, 12 to 14 on their plastron. And like you and me, their outer layer is made of keratin, the same protein we have in our hair and fingernails. So, I hope you've enjoyed discussing scutes, one of my favorite words. That's S-C-U-T-E-S. I'm having trouble spelling that word today. S-C-U-T-E-S. Scutes. So we're going to scoot along, and I hope you've enjoyed this session of Reptile Side Chat with Elaine A. Powers. Don't forget to sign up for my newsletter at elaineapowers.com or lyricpower.net. And I look forward to seeing you again in a future Reptile Side Chat. Bye. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to like, comment, and share, and subscribe. Every time you comment or share one of my videos, it helps me make more videos. And the more videos I make, the more people we reach. And the more people who know about reptiles, the more they'll want to protect them. It's a win-win. Thank you.